Is a Women's World Cup hosting deal in the works?
Is the Men's World Cup about to leap to 64 teams?
And is FIFA going to extend half-time for a World Cup final show?
And are punishments consistent for referee abuse? One ban has us thinking about the case of Nasser Al-Khalifi.
And how sound is funding maternity pay in tennis, but one boxer's been speaking out on the country. Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked with Martyn Ziegler from the Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. And welcome to the only pod where listeners are asking us why there isn't any advertising. Is there a call we missed or didn't get?
There is a sort of, I think fair to say, a trend of journalists becoming advertisers, because Fabrizio Romano, the journalist turned influencer, he's this week been advertising Club World Cup tickets for FIFA, and other people and other journalists as well who've got big social media followings have taken to advertising.
Interesting direction of travel. When are you an influencer? When you're a journalist, does it merge in the middle? And what can readers expect if, I guess, you're getting payment from the people you cover?
Obviously, any media outlet we've worked for takes adverts, but this is now a media figure in Romano as a personal brand outlet selling ads on the events he's covered in a journalistic role. But there's money to be made and needing to be made.
Yeah, but where do you draw the line? I guess it's a sort of becomes a grey area, doesn't it? Because if you're doing adverts for things you're reporting about, that becomes difficult.
It's a bigger. It's not just about sport as well. There was a story a few weeks ago that said Saudi Arabia's public relations operation is pivoting away from using mainstream media or even dialoguing with mainstream media to get some messages across, and going straight to influencers with big followings. And that way you kind of maybe get the message out that you want, rather than the balanced pros and con type of story that we're accustomed to.
Is this pod mainstream or new media?
Good question. We haven't quite reached the 23.5 million X-followers that Fabrizio Romano has, but we're on the way.
But FIFA managed to get a person with an even bigger social media following on board to promote the Club World Cup on Friday night. Gianni Infantino ending up in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, and with him, the Club World Cup. And as you will hear, the unveiling of it helped Trump evade some more challenging questions.
Who has more authority, Elon Musk or the cabinet secretary?
Any other questions?
About the World Cup?
Can we unveil the trophy, maybe?
I'd love to.
Because this is something special. So today is 100 days to go for a new competition that we created together, the FIFA Club World Cup. If you like it, Mr. President, it can stay here just on the 13th of July. You should take it with me.
Let's leave it here
to the stadium. To give it to the winners. They can take a picture, then we bring it back here after the picture.
Let's do that. We'll leave it here. We'll have it in the White House quite a bit.
The reason Gianni Infantino was in the Oval Office was because Donald Trump was signing the executive order to launch the World Cup task force. There is a World Cup behind Donald Trump at the Resolute desk. And Gianni Infantino made various claims about the financial benefits of not only the World Cup, but the Club World Cup. He said it would generate $40 billion for the US and create 200,000 jobs. And then Donald Trump actually took on the role of interviewer, putting him on the spot on football matters.
What team seems to be favored?
Well, on the club one, which takes place this year, of course, Real Madrid, Manchester City, Bayern Munich, the Germans, Paris Saint-Germain, the French. The big ones are always there, and these clubs are multinationals. They have players from all countries.
They always seem to be there. Right?
They are always there.
Those great
They are
teams.
always there. Yeah. And then next year, Argentina, Brazil, England, Germany, Spain.
It's going to be great.
So it will be great.
Any questions for Gianni?
US is coming up. US is coming. Watch the US. Some very, very good players playing in Europe, but we need to bring them back here.
So
to play here.
Can the US win?
The US can win, yes, with the public behind. They playing some of the top teams.
He knows.
They playing some of the top teams.
It's a shot, right?
Yeah, there is a shot. Absolutely, yes.
That's great.
It's all about growing soccer in the US, the World Cup next year, and about making it more credible. But what about this in the last week? Houston Dynamo saying they're going to be offering fans a free ticket for their next home match because their fans didn't get to see Lionel Messi play. Messi doesn't even play in their own team. Of course, he's with Inter Miami, and he wasn't included in their squad to visit Houston for the MLS match.
It's a bit embarrassing. I don't know. To me, it seems a bit embarrassing, this whole thing about why you'd be refunded a ticket because you didn't get to see one single player. I mean, I know obviously he's the sort of most famous player in the world and all that sort of thing, but it just seems a bit sort of artificial and plastic.
So that phrase, bigger than the club, that we hear sometimes with some players, we hear with Messi, you almost think bigger than the league with this type of scenario. But what I understood from some of the ticketing policies since Messi moved to the US is that clubs have been massively increasing ticket prices for those games. So if you were used to paying $20 to watch your club and suddenly, Messi's coming to town and you've got an $80 ticket, there is that, I guess, expectation that you're going to see this guy. And I guess for us in the UK, we're following teams, maybe not players. It is a bit weird, but there is an expectation and they perhaps weren't given what they were promised.
And there is a culture of dynamic ticket pricing in the US, but you couldn't imagine any major European league, an opponent of Bayern Munich giving a free ticket credit if Harry Kane didn't play, an opponent of Real Madrid offering a credit if Vinicius didn't play. But it does seem that it takes Messi to get MLS in the news, so perhaps not a bad thing, even when he's not playing, because the only other big headline we can really think of from MLS this season is when he got that fine for grabbing someone from New York City FC's coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly brings the eyeballs in whichever way, whether he's playing or not. But I suppose it begs a bigger question: what happens to Major League Soccer when he goes?
Yeah, you don't want to build yourself around one character, do you? One personality, as everyone chews in for the trio here.
Yeah, exactly. No, the Messi thing is, you would hope they would have used that to kind of make another leap. But we haven't seen any signs of what their plans are. I mean, even the television deal is predicated around Messi. He gets a share of this contract with Apple TV. And he's not a young guy, obviously. That's probably why he's over there. What happens next?
Well, Messi will turn 38 in June, the day after Inter's final group game at the Club World Cup.
Well, that could be their final game at the Club World Cup. Who knows?
Of course, there was that whole process to get Inter Miami in through that FIFA process. We have asked MLS, by the way, previously to come on the pod, and they've not been able to. Of course, technically, you could say it should have been LA Galaxy at the Club World Cup because they were the actual MLS champions by winning the MLS Cup. But back to Messi. We say he'll turn 38 during the Club World Cup. Will he be playing at the main World Cup at the age of 43 still in 2030? Well, Argentina have qualified automatically as one of the three co-hosts from South America. There are 6 countries overall. This mammoth centenary World Cup, as has been shaped by FIFA, it was already due to be 48 teams following the expansion for the 2026 tournament from 32. But it could be getting even bigger. Time for some spontaneous news. That word very much emphasised by FIFA.
Yes. So there was a FIFA council meeting, which is effectively its board, this past week. And there was quite a lot of news in there, which we'll get into after. But towards the end of it, in the area reserved for the miscellaneous section or any other questions, Ignacio Alonso, the head of the Uruguayan FA, the president of the Uruguayan FA, member of the FIFA board, he kind of delivered this speech in English, which surprised a load of people. A lot of people didn't know he spoke English. And he talked about the 2030 World Cup, the centenary. The first tournament was played in Uruguay in 1930. And of course, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina have been given one game each before the tournament goes to Portugal, Spain, and Morocco. But he said, look, this is the centenary. Let's do something special. And let's increase the size of the World Cup to 64. Left a lot of people on the Zoom call surprised. But, with these things, they're often choreographed, aren't they? I think people who need to know probably know what he's going to say.
It is 64 games now. It's taken the jump to 104 games, isn't it, for the 48 team edition in 2026. We actually worked out how many games there would be for a 64 team World Cup.
Yeah, it's north, was it 148 or something like that?
Well, of course, they could do something that they have introduced for the new Women's Club World Cup, which is going to be launching in 2028. In fact, long delayed. There's going to be a play-in stage, and this is similar to the first four in March Madness in US college basketball. So in the Women's Club World Cup, 6 teams will go to the tournament, but will only play one match to determine the final 3 slots for the 16-team regular group stage. So maybe something like this could be a plan for the 64 Men's World Cup. So teams feel part of it, but you've got to contest a single match playoff first. The one issue is, effectively, however small you are as a country, wouldn't you have to plan to reach the final?
There's more than that one issue, Rob. Let's go back a little bit before we get into 64 teams is an enormous number of countries. It's more than a quarter of FIFA's global membership. And we're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about all of these people traveling all over the world. We've talked about all the major issues around this. Then there's what happens to qualifying for the World Cup, which is, a thing in itself.
A key driver of revenue for countries around the world. That's TV rights, it's sales in terms of tickets to fill stadiums for competitive matches.
Yeah.
Indeed, it is. Tariq, I mean, you did well to break this story originally, but I also thought it was quite interesting, actually, how it panned out in the council meeting. Because speaking to some members, they're pretty much of the view that things don't get raised like that without sort of Gianni Infantino knowing about it beforehand and basically saying, yes, but by all means go ahead and do this. And FIFA say they have to analyse every proposal from a council member carefully, so they are going to consider it. But I think to say, I don't think there was a sort of round of applause and cheers, was there? It was more like a sort of stunned silence.
I'm slightly confused what you're saying, because didn't Saudi Arabia just spontaneously a few years ago propose a biennial World Cup in the Congress to be considered?
Well, yes, cynics amongst us might say that that things don't happen quite by chance. Just apart from the fact, obviously, it would be a sort of carbon neutral or even carbon positive event with such a small amount of air travel for the 64 teams. Again, I'm being a bit sarcastic. You could, if you wanted to do it, you could have effectively 2 32-team tournaments taking place, one in South America, one in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, and then they sort of come together for the knockouts.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do it that way.
Perhaps a way of ensuring it's not just a game each that the 3 South American countries had, because that was originally the plan, wasn't it? To include them, they'd host a match each at the start, then everyone would shift to Spain, Morocco, and Portugal, so it would keep them more part of it. So it would be like a bracket system, almost like a US-style East and West championship.
Yeah, but guys, this is the World Cup as well. We're trying to say that these are the best teams, and the one at the end is going to be the best team. It's going to be the world champion. The idea of these 64 teams, and in all, not being overly offensive here, teams from 48 to 64. If you can't make the top 48, you're not going to be very good as well. There's a qualitative issue here. You're just bringing a load of teams to perform in this competition. All these matches, I doubt there's global television appetite for this, or public appetite for this marathon of football matches. It's very strange. And how it was brought up as well, there is another undercurrent here. Paraguay, somehow, because it's home of CONMEBOL, managed to secure itself one of those games, because Argentina and Uruguay were going to get a game each, and Paraguay got one. Paraguay have really struggled to qualify for the World Cup. The CONMEBOL president happens to come from Paraguay. So there's a lot of countries in South America who are quite annoyed that this one game has given this team a free pass to a World Cup. That's also a play here. So it might be that Alejandro Dominguez, the CONMEBOL president, also knew about what was to come at the FIFA Council meeting.
It can't hinder election chances, particularly with the FIFA presidential election coming in 2027, and perhaps this would all be agreed in the sort of year beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a struggle to get it through. Actually, I think there's a lot of fairly important people in football, apart from Gianni Infantino, who don't think it's a good idea. But just to go back to this thing about having the two separate tournaments and the group stages in different places, they did that in Korea and Japan in 2002. So the groups, if you were playing in the group stage in Korea, all your matches were in Korea, and the same in Japan. So that could be a model. But the quality issue is definitely something, and it's not just the Men's World Cup.
Well, you were talking about, Tariq, teams 49 to 64 in the world. Do you know who are actually 48 in the rankings, just looking at them now? I didn't expect them to find them so high.
The famous Scots. No, I don't know who.
Qatar.
There you are.
There we go. And just looking down the list, you've got Iraq at 56, Saudi Arabia at 59, who perhaps would make the cut at 64, although, of course, it's through regional qualifying, so not exactly just the rankings. You'd get the United Arab Emirates and Jordan there squeezing in, if you were just to base it all on rankings.
Yeah. And it will have to alter the entire football calendar, of course, because there is no point for qualifiers if this is going to happen as well.
We weren't expecting the Men's World Cup to quite dominate this meeting so much as it was placed suddenly on the agenda, that expansion. But here's something. How do we feel about a fast-track World Cup bidding process, just a few weeks to register expression of interest, and then a government suddenly announcing their support for a World Cup bid within moments of confirmation of that process by FIFA? Well, we were quite sceptical and critical of that FIFA-Saudi arrangement in 2023, which paved the way to the 2034 World Cup hosting. But we've seen it again now, haven't we? The Women's World Cup process and a UK bid.
Yeah. FIFA is using exactly the same process for the 2031 and 2035 Women's World Cup as it did for the 2030 and 2034 Men's World Cups. It's stating which confederations are eligible to apply for each one. So 2031 is CONCACAF and CAF, and 2035 is UEFA and CAF can only choose one of them to bid for. So, and then within a couple of hours of the meeting ending, the British government had announced it was backing the bid, and there is slight differences, but you can see why FIFA might want to do the same thing, just to show that perhaps to try and claim that actually it was all fair for the Men's World Cup.
And we have questioned in the past why the Men's World Cups are awarded years out and the Women's World Cups are often sort of a few years before the tournament. So this process would lock in World Cup hosts right into the next decade to 2035. And, we saw the Brazil World Cup for 2027 only being awarded last year.
They're getting bigger and more complicated, aren't they? The Women's World Cup now is a huge event compared to what it might have been in the past in terms of what resources are required. The other thing, it happens when you have a president, whether it's an IOC president or a FIFA president, you want your hand on history well beyond your term in office, maybe. We've seen that with Thomas Bach and the Olympics.
You say beyond the president's term. Are we sure Gianni Infantino won't still be there in 2034 or 35?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it depends on how malleable the regulations are and whether, a spontaneous member decides to say, all hail the president, we want you to stay, please stay. And the president says, look, I know, my family want me to step down and I should, but because my members need me, I'm going to stay on. So who knows? He could be president for life.
To oversee the World Cups he helped to deliver.
Yeah.
Seeing the project through.
Yeah, just on the point you raised earlier, the difference with the Saudi Arabian situation in this case, there was a council meeting for the 2030 World Cup, as we expected, and it was suddenly announced that this operation that led to Saudi was suddenly available, and then a number of weeks. Can I ask, for the Women's World Cup that the UK is bidding for, was there an idea that it was going to be available soon?
There's been a lot of talk in the last year, but I don't think we knew it was going to be wrapped up at this week's meeting necessarily long time in advance. It has been a talking point I've been hearing in the last...
My question here is, Was the UK bidding or thinking of bidding for the Women's World Cup, the Football Association here? And had they spoken to the government about doing this?
Oh, yes, it's been a plan for the UK Sport Agency. I did a piece last September about how Britain thought a 48-team Women's World Cup would actually help their chances. So it's definitely been a priority.
Yeah, I interviewed the Debbie Hewitt, the FA chairwoman, in May 2023, in which she said that they wanted to bid for the Women's World Cup. So it's been talked about for a long time. But I think there wasn't an expectation that this 2035 was going to be on the FIFA Council meeting. It wasn't on the agenda, for example. That's an interesting thing. I think the papers only arrived with members quite late on. There was a bit of uncertainty around it, but there is a difference, though, with the Saudi thing. And the build, I mean, about 2 months or 6 weeks before the Saudi 2034 and the 2030 meeting, I did a story saying Saudi Arabia were preparing to bid and that they were being strongly encouraged by Gianni Infantino. So it did sort of seem to be a sort of fait accompli. Whereas I don't think there's been huge sort of driving forces of Gianni Infantino wanting the UK to bid.
We've not seen him with King Charles or Keir Starmer at all, constantly visiting the UK.
Exactly.
We have left out a key component of this whole discussion, which is the 2031 World Cup, which is set to go to the United States, because they withdrew from bidding for the 2027 tournament to clear the path for Brazil. So very much it always looked like it would be the US next in line, which of course gets another World Cup awarded to the United States during the Donald Trump presidency, as of course his first term saw the 2026 Men's World Cup awarded, and he constantly does thank Gianni, as he says, for giving them the World Cup.
The king of football, you mean?
King of soccer.
King of soccer.
South Africa also pulled out of the 2027 Women's World Cup bid. So they could be rivals for the US in 2031, or they could be rivals for the UK or another European bid for 2035. And I think they would be quite tough opponents, I think. I wonder, there is a sort of rumour going round that USA could not just be them on their own, that they could try and bring in a couple of Caribbean countries to sort of spread the love.
Sorry. Rather than bringing in the two neighbours they're working with for 2026, or they have slightly frosty diplomatic relations at the moment over the tariffs.
Well, it depends what time of the day it is. You've got a tariff at 9 a.m., then you haven't got one at 12 p.m., then you've got another one, then it comes in and out. It must be really hard, in all seriousness, to do any kind of joint project with the United States right now, given that there is a government element to a lot of these bids. And if you haven't got a consistent partner, it must be really hard to say, this is what we're going to present, when, by tea time, your relationship is completely different.
And we touched on a 48-team Women's World Cup there, because this is something also under consideration. Currently a 32-team event, but within those FIFA bidding documents, the option to expand the hosting.
Yeah, it says it's subject to change. And in the council meeting, Gianni Infantino actually reiterated his desire for it to go up to 48 teams. And, you were talking about the sort of issues around smaller nations playing bigger ones and the sort of big discrepancies in quality, Tariq. I mean, that's another thing that could raise its head with the Women's World Cup. We've actually quite often seen very high scorelines in some women's internationals. It's a bit of a risk.
It is. I think FIFA felt they made the right choice by expanding to 32 for Australia and New Zealand, because surprisingly the performances by and large were not so wide, weren't polarizing the results. So, but going to 48 so far seems, I don't know why. What the 32 team Women's World Cup seemed to work, and they've only had one edition so far. This rush, I think it's because this effort to kind of make everything the same. But if you talk to people in women's football, it doesn't all have to be the same. That's not how women's football will grow, just because you map it onto whatever's happening in men's football. It just seems a little bit like, well, we're going to have to do this because we've done that, rather than what's best for women's football right now.
And all sorts of challenges in the women's game about players not receiving significant salaries across the game as well. And this is something that's being considered around the new Women's Club World Cup and the Champions Cup, which is going to be the smaller edition held in 2026, 2027 and 2029, featuring the 6 Confederation champions. Before then, this delayed Club World Cup starts in 2028. There's talk of minimum standards being introduced, unclear what they might be. Would it require teams to have a certain sort of threshold of salaries that they are paying their players to enter? Would FIFA effectively be funding those salaries, as we saw with the Men's Women's World Cup in Australia, where it wasn't just about prize money, but about players getting payments for the first time?
Yeah, it's a growing sport. You've got countries like England, which has poured significant amounts of money in the recent past into women's professional football, allowing women to earn a decent salary across the board around the world. It's not matched at all, is it? So when you're having a Club World Cup for women, what does that actually mean? Who are the participants in this? And their kind of professional lives will be very, very different.
And a whole discussion in the English game about expansion of the Women's Super League and potentially ending relegation for a few years to grow the league by bringing more teams up through promotion, but not relegating any teams. So not quite a closed league, but partially so. It stirred quite a debate because suddenly some of those games at the lower end of the table would become meaningless if you know you're not going to be relegated. But above all, something that was discussed on a call with the WSL leadership. But this has created a talking point around the WSL, which has got it more headlines and more coverage by people having passionate views.
Yeah, but Rob, we've said this a few times. We said this about the MLS. At the end of the day, it's a sport here, and if you're just going to be known for your news and not an audience,
but we need news. This is what we're talking about.
We need news.
We're mentioning it,
but there has to be an audience to watch the actual product, the sport, and enjoy it rather than the news around it. That should be the draw. It'd be interesting, like if we do this in 4 or 5 years, to see what the audiences are like. Have they held up? And are new entrants or new fans coming into this sport? It's still so young when you think about it.
And is it entertainment that's needed to bring an audience in? Because that's certainly on the FIFA agenda, because they think for the Men's World Cup in 2026, it's time to introduce a big halftime show for that final. There's nothing new having a music act at a World Cup match. In Qatar in 2022, I remember the British pop star Chesney Hawkes was playing at halftime of England-Wales. Perhaps not known to that many people, bit of a one-hit wonder person.
Yeah, I think the word star is in inverted commas there.
Yeah, the one and only.
Yes, the halftime show at the 2026 World Cup final. Super Bowl style, people say, that normally lasts half an hour. Big issue, though, the laws of the game say you can only have 15 minutes. There have been various attempts to increase that. CONMEBOL, the South American Confederation, tried to do it. The German FA tried to do it in order to sell more sausages. Always rejected because there is a...
Health grounds?
Yeah, basically, players...
No, I meant for the seller eating more sausages.
Oh, eating more sausages, yes. The players didn't want it. They didn't want to be tempted by bratwurst. No, there is a sort of performance issue here that actually, if it's longer than 15 minutes and players, their muscles start getting cold. So at the Copa America last year, it was 25 minutes. And CONMEBOL was just basically sort of run roughshod over the laws of the game and to have Shakira playing. So I've asked FIFA, will they guarantee it's going to be no longer than 15 minutes, or will they try and change the law? And they basically refuse to rule it out.
What sort of consequence is there, though? If you're the event organizer, you're the confederation running the tournament, are FIFA going to sanction you for breaching the laws of the game for having a halftime that's longer than is allowed? What would happen if on a sort of local league somewhere, they decided to have a 25-minute halftime, the local music act?
You've just stumbled into a major governance question that has been raised at the European Court of Justice in Super League and all these other cases. When the event organizer and the governing body is the same, and should FIFA be broken up? Maybe for another day. Exactly. Who's going to sanction you when you're the event organizer and the governing body?
No one is going to sanction you, obviously, but it's a massive PR own goal if you do this and it's against the laws of the game.
Should the Copa America final be replayed because it was technically in breach of the laws of the game by having a half-time that was too long?
Run by a FIFA vice president, by the way, so I'm sure he would be aware of the news. It seems like they don't care. Let's be honest. And Ziggs, come on, a PR own goal. It'd be very rare for FIFA to score a PR own goal, so I'm sure they'll be cognizant of this, and it will be within the 15-minute mark.
Yeah. At the Copa America, the Colombia head coach, Nestor Lorenzo, he criticised CONMEBOL's decision and actually pointed out that actually him and other coaches had actually been fined for arriving back on the field of play a minute late. So it was like 16 minutes during the Copa America, but actually suddenly it was okay for the final.
Do as I say, not as I do. Rules are for the small people. But on the halftime show, this is what the Super Bowl does, the NFL Super Bowl, the American big marquee sporting event. By aping it, it's not FIFA's, it's not football's. You're kind of just copying someone else's thing. You're losing something of your own identity by saying, okay, we'll just do what you do and pander to an American audience that gets it from a different sport.
I think I'm consistent in mentioning this previously on the pod that it's not the end of the game by having a slightly longer half-time for one match every year or so.
The best match,
it brings a wider audience.
The best match in football every 4 years. These players have been working their entire careers to try and win this World Cup. So it's not just any game. And if you want peak, we're here to watch the footballers, not the singers. There's many concerts. And if you want to bring a new audience, bring a new audience. But if these footballers work their entire lives, right, to try and win this World Cup, and if, Shakira's shaking her hips for another 10 minutes, you're going to pull your muscle afterwards. How is that good for the game? If they're going to pull their muscles, she'll be shaking her hips, Rob.
That is the sort of PR own goal I was talking about. And if the coaches start criticising FIFA afterwards because of that, then that could be an issue. However, say FIFA goes to IFAB and asks for a change in the laws of the game, so it's leave it up to competition organisers to decide, then they'll need at least 2 of the 4 British associations to vote with them. Does the UK have any particular reason for wanting to be on FIFA's side?
Is anyone bidding for anything?
Anyone bidding for anything?
Cynics has created an era if they are bidding for the Women's World Cup that they suddenly can't be critical of FIFA.
Yeah, no red cards for FIFA. But that's a bit of an issue, actually, just to go very briefly back. With the English FA gave Alexander Sheffrins a red card and giving him the option to stand as president beyond 2027. That's a potential issue for the English FA if they want UEFA's backing. So no wonder they've got Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales who have good relations with Sheffrin to try and, I guess, get him on board.
One final point on the halftime show. Couldn't they just have a pre-match music acts instead? Get fans in the stadium early, which means they're buying more food and drink if you were to have it, an hour beforehand, if it's all about the commercial side of the game for FIFA as well.
They kind of do that anyway, don't they?
Well, an opening ceremony.
Yeah.
I think
Shakira's often played at before finals, I think, isn't she?
And to hear from Gianni Infantino on those halftime show plans, it's back to that Oval Office meeting with Donald Trump.
Would you like the Super Bowl halftime show for better?
Well, the Super Bowl has around 100 million viewers or 150 million viewers. The World Cup final has 2 billion viewers. So we have to make it 20 times better and 20 times bigger than the Super Bowl.
I think it will be better.
Gianni Infantino also dropped in on Donald Trump's crypto summit while at the White House, and he started to pitch a FIFA coin, searching for investors.
So FIFA is very interested under my presidency to develop a FIFA coin, to do it from here, from America, and to conquer the 5 billion soccer fans in the world. So if there's anyone here who is interested to team up with FIFA, here we are, together with the United States of America, and we'll conquer the world of soccer with the FIFA coin.
That coin may be worth more than FIFA in the end. It could be quite a coin, actually. Anyway, thank you.
talking FIFA crypto coins in the White House is not quite where I expected Gianni Infantino's week to end, but I suppose we didn't think we'd be talking about halftime shows either.
It's extremely lucrative, that halftime show. I think the last one at the Super Bowl, you got an audience in the US, at least of 120 million people at peak during the halftime show. So the advertising you're selling is going to be very, very significant. But FIFA is already loaded. It's so rich. Like the idea to ruin this showpiece final or to damage it in some way in order to do this, it just seems unnecessary, to be honest with you. But maybe it's been promised to the United States for the audience over there.
And it's that US audience that so many in football want. So this week we've had the president of Serie A saying they're talking about becoming the first major European league to stage regular season games in the United States. This all made possible because of a change in FIFA policies.
Are they inspired by rugby league?
Well, yes, as discussed on last week's pod.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to happen, isn't it? We've got La Liga and Serie A. It was interesting, the Serie A comments, actually. That they're very, very sensitive to domestic audiences. For example, they're saying that a game like Inter versus AC Milan, the Milan derby, that would never be something that could be staged in the US. You can imagine fans at home would go crazy, and that's the balance. But he also said the Premier League, the English Premier League, is so far ahead that these other leagues have to think about doing these things in order to try and keep up somehow.
And 9 of the 20 Serie A clubs are owned by Americans. Another is owned by Canadians. So you can see why they would be swaying the league.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen sooner or later, isn't it? It's just who goes first, and does that give them a big advantage?
The president of Serie A, Ezio Simonelli, said this is a market that we count on a lot, and he talks about needing to thank them, the American and Canadian owners, since they elected me, and we've got other prospective buyers lined up. So this very much seems like opening the doors. We'll take a game there, come and buy some of our clubs.
They've been saying this for a very long time, though, Rob. I remember being at a conference. You might have been there. I don't know where we were. And there was a Serie A kind of stand trying to drum up interest in selling clubs here in London. It's got to be like 10 years ago. It's like constant effort to get external investment to buy their football teams. It'd be great if Serie A could return close to its heyday, wouldn't it? Just to have this great footballing nation having its clubs at the top again.
All those leagues trying to catch up with the Premier League, which really does dominate, along with La Liga. The Ligue 1 got itself some headlines in the last week. The Lyon manager, Paulo Fonseca, banned for 9 months for a confrontation with a referee. This happened a day after the IFAB meeting where I interviewed FIFA refereeing chief Pierluigi Collina, who talked about the dangers faced by referees, saying it's harder than ever to referee the game. Who would be a referee confronted by managers and others at matches?
So it's an awful environment in France. This is a few weeks after the Marseille president, Pablo Longoria, was given, I think, 14 or 15 matches banned for calling a referee corrupt before an appointment there. And this environment for referees is very hostile at the moment. And there was an incident at the Liverpool-Paris Saint-Germain game in the Parc des Princes this week at half-time, with directors from the French club trying to confront the referee during the half-time there. This is not a good moment to be a referee at all. I've seen so many cases like this from Spain as well. A lot of criticism that has led to risks, to referees in their profession.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone sees a video of the Fonseca incident. He's like shouting and bawling at the referee, and it comes so close to him that actually his head makes contact gently, but it makes contact with the referee's head, and that's completely unacceptable, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I think you were at the start of the pod, Tariq, you were sort of talking about harking back to the Nasser al-Khalifi incident with Real Madrid, and I mean, he was cleared of any wrongdoing then, I think, wasn't he?
Well, this was really weird, actually. This was another Champions League game against Real Madrid, where after the game, I got access to the referee's report, Danny Michelis, and he said, Nasser Al Khalifi went down and almost tried to get through the door, and the linesman's flag was destroyed in this incident. And it took weeks and weeks for UEFA to deal with this. And eventually, after the season on a Friday night, the actual ruling came out, page 4 or 5 of a disciplinary report that didn't even mention Nasser Al Khalifi at all. It mentioned Leonardo, the former PSG director who was already leaving the club, getting a one-match ban. Now, when we're talking about these attacks on referees and giving them space, we've got this guy getting months and months, as perhaps he should. We've got the president of Marseille there getting weeks. And I just think there should be greater transparency in how this works. And we've talked about, powerful people getting their way in football. It seems, from the outside at least, based on the evidence and the referee's report, that this might have been another case. It just struck me as how different. What if Nasser Al Khalifi did it today in today's environment? Would there be no punishment at all?
He is, of course, a member of the UEFA Executive Committee. Well, one final bit of football news to discuss. It's more of an update on a situation now 3 years in the making about Roman Abramovich at Chelsea. Now, of course, he was forced to sell the club after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Abramovich was sanctioned by the British government, a process that eventually led to the sale of Chelsea to the Clearlake Todd Bowley consortium. But the cash proceeds from the sale are still frozen. They're meant to be released for projects in Ukraine, although Abramovich always hoped it would go to effectively victims of the war on both sides, I think.
Yeah, that's been the problem here. The British government says it has to be used for humanitarian purposes in Ukraine. The foundation has to spend it on those projects. Abramovich is refusing to accept this, and it's coming up to 3 years. The money's there. It's still in his company's account. It's frozen. The Guardian reported that ministers are now losing patience and they are considering going to court, taking Abramovich to court, which, do you think there's anything more at play here?
Well, there obviously are moves to end the war, ever-changing in the last week or so with Donald Trump and his fallout with Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, his hopes of securing an end to it with Vladimir Putin. What happens if things do accelerate and the war ends? Are sanctions lifted? Abramovich has kept very quiet in the last 3 years. He's made sure he's been seen at certain apparent peace talks to seem like an attempted peace broker.
Yeah, this is quite ridiculous now, isn't it? The point, you have £2.5 billion, I guess, in a bank account there that's frozen. The government had talked about using interest from some of these sanctioned accounts to help fund the war in Ukraine. What is the legal conundrum here, Ziggs? Have you got to do you understand it in a way that we can decipher why this is stuck? So Abramovich seems to have the final say where this money goes, and the government is saying, no, you don't, and that's where we are.
Well, I suppose if you're a Russian oligarch and your money is frozen, then it is, it stays in the account. So you can't take it out, other people can't take it out, government can't take it out. But so I suppose the legal thing is, can he be forced to accept the government's rules on this? That'll be the issue. So the company is Fordstam, the former holding company for Chelsea, which I noticed its accounts are 2 years overdue. It hasn't filed any accounts to Companies House since the invasion of Ukraine.
Is there no one to sign them off because they're sanctioned?
I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? But it's very unusual that for a company. Very unusual.
Yeah, but it's a very unusual circumstances with a sanctioned oligarch. Just to go back, it was his idea as well, wasn't it? If we remember those press releases and that really febrile moment around Abramovich and Chelsea way back then. This announcement that the monies would all go the proceeds of the sale would go to, first of all, it said charities and then victims of the war. It was from the Abramovich side that this was the language, correct?
Before he was actually sanctioned,
Yeah.
the moves were initiated to somehow relinquish control, at the very least, of the club. Yeah. Well, we'll wait to see how that one does develop, part of a wider geopolitical issue in terms of how that war might or might not end fairly quickly. Well, we've been very football heavy this week, but there is some other sports news to get into revolving around Saudi Arabia and an announcement from the WTA Tour.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. This, I thought, is that so the WTA. I mean, a very good move in that they've become the first international sports body to introduce a maternity leave scheme for their top players, 12 months, but it's being funded by the Saudi PIF.
Yeah, and if you think about that deal, do you remember there was a letter from Martina Navratilova before the deal with Saudi, before taking the WTA tournaments to Saudi Arabia, saying this must not happen because it's not a place, as far as she was concerned, and others that respect or have respect for women in the terms that women's tennis expects. Now, this is a very, very interesting moment, right? If now these people are the ones who are funding this maternity cover, would you call it maternity washing, guys, in some way?
I mean, it's certainly beneficial for the players, and if it hasn't been offered previously elsewhere, they are providing necessary financial help and ensuring that players can take maternity leave.
Absolutely, it's great. But do you then say, well, look, guys, they are funding our maternity cover. Please don't criticize them, Rob. Is there going to be a quid pro quo here when it comes to human rights? Because this is really a great program here, right? Funding maternity cover and maternity cover women's tennis players is something that's much needed. But given the source of the funding, do you then have to bite your lip?
Well, we've not had, say, blue chip companies from the West offering such funding to fund maternity pay in tennis, have we?
But so then the question is, who decides how the money is spent? Should it not be the WTA, when it receives funding from all of its sponsors and its TV companies, that says we should do maternity cover? So sponsorship is a pool of money, presumably, Rob. So
not being attached to one sponsor.
Is it the blue chip company's role, or is it the sports governing body, the WTA, to institute a maternity cover in this case and how it spends its money?
Yeah, should the WTA be the ones to announce it being about their policy rather than one particular sponsor getting the credit for the funding?
Interesting also, they're funding 12 months because paid maternity leave in Saudi Arabia itself is only 3 months.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting. Maybe there'll be now the women in Saudi Arabia will see this very generous benefit given to international tennis players and say maybe we will have. Can we request 12 months instead of 3 for us here in Saudi Arabia too? Maybe it will spark a debate.
Be interesting to hear from the Saudis. And women's rights did come up in an interview I did this week with Cindy Nagamba, who might be familiar to some as the first ever member of the Olympic refugee team to win a medal. She won bronze in boxing in Paris. She was about to contest her first pro fight this week. And I'd interviewed her ahead of it. We discussed about what it meant to be a refugee boxer, the challenges she's gone through in the UK, not being granted citizenship 15 years after leaving Cameroon. And she talked about fears of being returned to Cameroon because she could be imprisoned for being gay. So we talked about LGBTQ plus rights. And that brought the conversation to Saudi Arabia, where so many of the biggest fights are, so much investment is put into the sport from. And she said, I'll give my opinion about it. I think it's very bad. I don't think I would want to go to Riyadh if the law has not changed on LGBTQ plus and for females. Mainly, I did say, well, the Saudis say that things are improving. There are more rights. Women are competing in sport. And she said, I need proof. That's my answer.
And
she's not going to Riyadh.
She's just pulled out.
Well, yeah, within a few hours of this interview being published, they suddenly announced that due to a medical issue that needed further examination, that she would not actually contest the pro debut she was due for on Friday night at the Royal Albert Hall in London.
So she won't maybe get to see for herself then?
Well, you still have the option of fighting in Saudi one day. If there's a card perhaps she's included on, would she actually take that stand and say, I'm not fighting?
Yeah.
She says she would.
Yeah.
Interesting
Wishing her
story.
a speedy recovery.
And as ever, you can message us at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, email us sportunlockedpod@gmail.com. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.